Welcome, everybody. I'm Noreen Savage, and this is Starting Out Bright. I'm so glad you're here. And I'd just like to start by telling you a little bit of who I am and who I'm not. First of all, I am no one official with Bright Line Eating. I'm doing this as hope and encouragement for people. And Bright Line Eating has done a lot for me. 2 years ago, my friend Lori posted on her Facebook page that she had lost 57 pounds with Bright Line Eating. If anybody was interested, they could ask her questions. So my little hot fingers zoomed over to Messenger and asked Lori, what is this Bright Line Eating? And she proceeded to tell me that there were 4 bright lines that you don't cross. There's a book by Dr. Susan Pierce Thompson, Bright Line Eating. And the 4 bright lines are no sugar, no flour, 3 meals a day, and weighed and measured portions. And when Lori told me that, my heart sunk because I thought there is absolutely no way that I can do that. But I really like you, Lori. Let's go for lunch and talk some more. And that's what we did. She told me a little bit more and she said, if you want to continue this, I suggest 2 things. Get the book and get in the community. At that time was We Eat Bright with Lines. Since then, there's the official Bright Line group, which is a public group. Starting Out Bright is a private group that kind of works hand in hand with this, where you can find the replays. And many other, I could count probably 50 other groups. So there's a lot of community support. And I did that. I got the book, I got in the community, and what I saw was just astonishing. I saw people losing weight like crazy. But it was more than that. It was the encouragement everybody was giving each other and also walking through struggles together. There was a lot of camaraderie, a lot of accountability. And I felt for the first time so much hope. I promised myself that if I lasted 1 year, I would do the same thing. I get choked up sometimes thinking about it. I promised myself if I lasted 1 year, I would do what Lori did. I would post on my private Facebook page and I would help anybody I could. Well, I'm a Christian, and at that year mark, when I got ready to post, I felt God say, Noreen, you can do more than that. You could, it's the time of Zooms with COVID. It was July 2020. And the thought was, if I could connect people, these people who have been successful, with those who are just starting out, resuming, or just trying so hard to improve their lives. And it would help just even one person. It would be worth it. And so that's what the Zooms are about. That's what Starting Out Bright is about. And I am absolutely amazed at the wonderful guests. This is our 61st interview. And look who's taken a hit for the team, Chris. Chris Harris. So good to see you. And I know your wife Meredith is coming on, and you'll all understand why too, as we get talking, how special this relationship is and how important it is, for Chris and for Meredith. So we'll get talking about that. And, I told a little bit about my story very briefly. And Chris, if you could start us off with what brought you to Bright Line Eating. You can go back as far as you want or as close as you want.
Sure.
To where you jumped in.
Thanks for asking me to do this. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
Meredith got up a minute ago while you were talking, not because she's super rude, but because our dogs they pick this time right now to just be as loud as possible. So she was corralling animals. Yeah, Noreen and I got a chance to visit a little bit last night, and like I was telling you last night, I'd never really thought about it until I was thinking about doing this. But my first memory of having an issue with weight, because I wasn't really an overweight child, was when I was about 13. I spent a few months with my grandmother after my mother died, and I came to live with my dad after that. And I was only gone for about 3 months. And when I came back, my father said, I would not have recognized you on the street. And he said things like, you were a little round child. So they immediately put me on a very strict, it was like salad only kind of a thing, which I I don't know if that was right or not, because I feel like it would have worked itself out. I was a pretty athletic kid. But that's the first time I have a memory of like not being able to eat whatever I wanted to. And that restriction feeling was just, it was unpleasant. I didn't like it. It didn't last long, but I remembered that. And then I didn't have a weight issue through high school. I was an athlete, and it wasn't until really college that my drinking, which is another issue I have, compounded with a lack of activity. My pant sizes started to go up. They'd go from 32 to 34 to 36. So why are they making pants smaller? I know it's not me. And like I told you last night, the first thing I remember doing to try to drop weight was actually Slim Fast, which in the early 90s was, kind of it was everywhere. It was advertised everywhere.
Right.
And it worked to the extent that it got weight off. And it was right before I started law school, and then my drinking continued in law school. With enough stress and very little time, I didn't really balloon up until after I got out of law school and started working full time. And it was a sedentary job. And I would go through these cycles of, I would go up, and then I would just, by force of will, really, and at some point, my diet consisted primarily of, scotch. So that helped keep some of the weight off, believe it or not. And then after I got sober, I got up to over 300 pounds, which is one of the pictures that you showed. And that weight lasted for, I was kind of in and out of that area for maybe a decade. I wouldn't get far from it, and I was miserable. And I don't know. I mean, I would try various things. I did Atkins and lost 100 pounds.
Yeah.
I gained all of it back like everybody does, because all I wanted was pancakes and I didn't tell myself that. I told myself I could eat this way forever. I could just have butter and bacon, and this is wonderful. And she came along the ride with me because she's incredibly patient and supportive. She let me know about halfway through my weight loss that she was real done with Atkins. I was like, oh, what can be better than this? This is great. I can just slather mayonnaise onto.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't, I didn't pay much attention to the science of it or understand it. And I'm not sure there was much. The truth is, if you eat like that and you are eating a restrictive diet, and I just didn't want to eat meat and butter and bacon anymore. And so I was just eating less, is what I believe happened.
And measuring your ketones.
Yeah.
Atkins was my first diet too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Other than we didn't talk about that, but yeah, I didn't do Slim Fast, but Atkins. Yep.
Well, it got me down to a weight that it got me down to 190 before I slid out of it. And, I would start avoiding the scale, the same thing. And I would check it every once in a while. And after a couple of months, I was like, I'm glad I've only gained 30, and I just shot right back up and over. And I said, well, the grandmother that I told you about, she was a dear woman in my life. She was about 4'10" and was 100 pounds overweight her whole life. And she went to a group called Tops, and she was always fighting it, but just losing that battle. And seeing that struggle was something in the back of my brain, I think, telling me, you know what, you've just got the genes to be large as an adult. When I saw a picture of her, I was probably in high school. The first time I saw a picture of her around 1945, when she just got married, super thin. I didn't recognize her at all because I'd never known her that way. And I think I just told myself that this is just how it is. My sister's larger. My mother, she died young, but before she did, she was starting to get larger. And I just kind of believed, well, other people don't have to work this hard. And I was telling myself I really wasn't eating that much, Well, about 10 years ago, she and I both, she's never really had the kind of weight issue that I have. By the way, Meredith, you can say hi.
Hi.
I'm speaking for you.
Never lets me talk.
But I really, really, really wanted to get healthier. About 10 years ago, I was 40, and
Already gotten sober by then.
yeah, I'm sorry. I got sober in the late 90s,
Okay.
uh, a few arrests and lost job and some other things thrown in there were telling me that perhaps I need not drink. And anyway, it's a long way of answering the question. How did you get into bright line eating? About a couple of years ago, my sister actually we were at Christmas and she was telling me about this crazy thing she was about to do where she eats no sugar and no flour. And like me, she has struggled mightily throughout her life. She's a few years older than I am. And I was like, I mean, I was receptive. I was listening to her. And then a couple of weeks after Christmas, she gave me a call and she said, I'm reading this book and you really need to read it because it explains to me some things like why her husband's name is Greg, why we can be working on it and he can have a cheat day. And if I have one, it's wheels off. And our dad he was a chemist and a biologist, and he was, kind of steeped in the sciences. And she goes, there's parts of this book you're really going to connect with. And so I was like, well, sure. I don't like to brag about this. I've never spent a single penny on Bright Line Eating. I got the book as an Audible book for free with a trial and never paid another penny, but it connected with me in the same way that with me, alcoholism was really one bright line. Don't drink booze, and I was given a promise in AA, among others, but the most important one to me was if you do this, the compulsion to drink will be relieved. And it was that compulsion, that freedom that I instantly connected with because I'm an addict and not just alcohol. I went through other things too. But I was like, if that's true and you can do this with food, I am all in. And so I, kind of mentally gave myself, I didn't do it one day at a time. I didn't do AA one day at a time. I said, I'm going to do 60 days and see how it goes.
And how long did it take? I mean, just comparing.
Well, with alcohol, it was a good 6 months. I had night sweats. I had severe withdrawals. It was a physical thing. I know what withdrawal feels like, and it was 6 months before I remember very, very clearly the day where I realized it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had not given a single thought to alcohol since 24 hours before, and I was like, that's the first time since I first got drunk when I was in second grade. And that was the first day that I could remember where I'd gone 24 hours without thinking about alcohol. And so it wasn't the not going to jail or the other things that happened that was the big gift. It was the not, we never went anywhere unless I was able to drink there. I was just not without alcohol for, too long, really. So I've been sober for 20 years when I started Bright Line Eating. But this is the first thing I ever read and connected with that I thought, no, I understand why that can work. I didn't know if I could do it, but I at least understood that I don't care how hard it is at the beginning, I'll probably go through some kind of withdrawal, but I'm absolutely going to stick with this for 60 days, not one day at a time. It was 60 days I gave myself. And with me, I was lucky. It only took me maybe 3 weeks, where the physical stuff kind of
The
straightened
detox was
yeah.
a lot simpler and
Yeah, it's shorter. I don't know how. I mean, I had insomnia and some things that I recognized, but it was mercifully short with me. I know some people go through that for months, but I didn't.
And I think it's really important as you're talking about the science piece because somebody here or somebody who will watch it later, this talk, they may think of bright line eating as just a diet, but you're referring to your dad, the scientist, the chemist, the biologist. What is the science piece that really spoke to you beyond the bright lines, which you really understood very personally because you had the one bright line?
Right. There were a few more of them.
There were a few more, but you truly understood. You had already gone through that.
So when I got sober, there was a book that I read called Under the Influence, and it was written by a medical doctor. And this MD had laid out his opinion at the time, because we're talking late 90s, that there was a genetic link between alcoholism and well, it's in your DNA, basically. And he said, here's my proof. He said, there's an inverse relationship between the amount of time that a society has been exposed to alcohol and the percentage of that society that is alcoholic. For example, the Chinese have been exposed to alcohol for over 5,000 years, and they have less than 1% of their population that's alcoholic. Whereas, and the idea being that alcoholics don't tend to live as long, they don't reproduce. And so that genetic trait is just kind of weeded out over the years. And he said Native Americans have a much higher, by some estimates, 80% alcoholism rate, or tendency at least, because they've been exposed to alcohol in this form for, like 500 years. And so he said, there's some pretty significant, and it goes all the way, tracks through Western Europe. And to me, that was so important, not because I needed to not be blamed for alcoholism. That wasn't it. The reason it was important to me is because what it was telling me was, okay, if I can remove the substance, then maybe I can address some of the wreckage that I've created in the chaos in my life, not the other way around. In AA, there was a very, and I'm not at all down on AA at all. I'm just not a 12-step expert. I was in that program and it got me sober, and I feel like it saved my life. But the reason that I was allowed, I think, to stay in it with my mindset, or I continued to go, is because I went, I don't have to fix myself as a human being first in order to get sober.
Okay.
Like all the childhood stuff, all of the, I don't have to do that. I can address that later. Just don't drink. And if I don't drink, then the compulsion can be relieved, right? Because I feel like so many people spend a lot of time in AA, and all it is group therapy, really, which is important and incredibly important. But for me, I was like, I'm not sorting all that stuff out now in order to get sober. That's going to take a lot of untangling. And so I just wanted to go at it from that standpoint. And so with Bright Line Eating, it was the leptin part when she was, explaining a spike in insulin, also increases leptin, which then blocks your ability to say, I'm full.
Right.
That, whether it was true or not, I was totally willing to believe that, because how many times have I eaten until I'm physically uncomfortable from the neck down, miserable, and not really proud of myself at all, and still wanting to eat food? That never made any sense to me
or
at all.
even not feeling the fullness. And my husband doesn't have any problem with eating. And I would say to him, like, I never feel full. Do you? And he's like, yeah, I feel full. And I'm like, I never feel full, like terribly full. It would have to be massively, like a major meal.
It would only be at almost the point of distension, where I would know that I have eaten way too much and then want to continue to eat, which is a separate kind of an issue. But that explanation to me made a lot of sense. I always thought of it in a different way. Like, well, I've just expanded my stomach so much that I never feel full. Well, it didn't make total sense either. So that part of the science made some sense to me. And honestly, just explaining the difference between a block of ice on a sidewalk and how on a hot day in Texas, it'll melt, but it's going to take a long time. Whereas if you take ice shavings and scatter them across a hot driveway, it's going to instantly go away. That absorption issue made complete and total sense to me.
Right.
So, those things made me think, and I haven't independently verified any of this outside of it seems to work for me.
Well, it sounds like like even the book that introduced you to that concept, that maybe it's in the DNA. And so that you could almost work from the outside in, like, wait, I now see this knowledge and I'm going to use that piece of knowledge. And it's not putting down any other method, but you chose that way, and, seeing that you needed to cut that one thing out for you personally. And, that does make sense in that way for me too.
And it was important that what Meredith did when I quit drinking is, I just asked her, she drinks some, but like a normal human being, not like a maniac. And so when I got sober, I just asked her if it would be okay to keep alcohol out of the house for a while. And she, of course, absolutely, we could keep alcohol out of the house for a while. And again, it took me about 6 months before I was, comfortable for that stuff to come back into the house. And yeah, I call it having my legs. When I felt comfortable in my sobriety, then it wasn't a problem for me to be around her or to trust myself that if there's a bottle of wine in the house at 10 p.m., it'll still be there at 7 a.m. if Chris is in the house. So that was hugely important. And we did the same thing at the beginning of this. Like I said, she went down the Adkins Road with me, although she needed to lose 0 weight. She's been through a bunch of things with me and always supportive. And it's like, well, Chris is working out, so I'm going to work out. It's kind of the way we've dragged each other through life for the last 30 years. And when we started this, I told this story, but I just, the first meal that we had after we both went through the book was fajita meat that I had left over. And I was just going to have the fajitas and the vegetables because I hadn't really prepared. I was ready to go. As soon as I finished the book, I was like, let's start. Okay. And so I started making fajitas and she pulled out the tortillas and I was like, what are those? And she let me know in no uncertain terms that if we're having fajitas, she was going to eat them with flour. And perhaps Chris doesn't need that, but she does. And I just asked nicely, but she was like, yeah, of course, I'll get rid of the tortillas. Or she hid them or whatever. She ate them later. I don't know. But I didn't see them. And it really, really helped. Again, it was only for me about 3 weeks. And what did you lose?
I think I've lost about 6 or 7 pounds.
Yeah.
And my highest weight, if you saw the picture of the first of both of us, the one on the left, that was my highest weight. I'm 5'2", and I was 160 pounds, which is pretty heavy for my height. My grandmother was always probably over 220 pounds or so. So while I don't have as much of a struggle as he, I do have to watch it, some extent what I eat. And
well, I learned something from this too.
Activity and
when we started, she goes, I think about food all the time, which is not something I realized, that mental baggage in order to keep weight off. I didn't realize how much you actually do.
I think about it for you.
Yeah.
So when you say that, Meredith, when you say that you had the mental baggage going on, the food chatter, was it food chatter or was it just figuring out how you could bargain through the day? Like, oh, if I do this walk for 3 miles, then I can have a piece of pizza. I mean, what was that how you were like? Because it sounds like very low susceptibility.
Right. No, it was more of just the thinking about food. Like I like food. I like to go out to eat. So think about, where could we eat, which is how, we got to 300 pounds and 160 pounds. I mean, it was a lot of that, but you just feel miserable. Even if you think, well, what could we eat tomorrow? Where could we go eat? You would just, for me, I would just feel full all the time and just miserable. And, just thinking about it, what's next? So that freedom that Bright Line Eating has given us, I think has helped a lot.
First time I ever ate a meal over at her house, we were in high school. We met in high school. And I just remember how weird it was. Her dad was home for lunch. Her mom was there. And we had lunch sitting around a kitchen table. And all they talked about during the entire meal was food. Not just the food that we were eating right then, but the food that they were going to eat later, what was going to be for dinner, how was breakfast. It was just, to me, it was the oddest conversation that they just constantly talked about food during a meal, And again, look, Ed's, when you talk to Ed Pettit, I got so much out of that because he comes at it from a completely different, viewpoint. And from an addiction standpoint, I think he gets it more than I do. I always viewed my issue as just making the terrible choices until I started really looking at it honestly after I started Bright Line Eating. And then I'm like, look, nobody sits down and eats an entire sleeve of Ritz crackers with peanut butter unless they have some kind of, an issue going on. And so my admission that I had a problem with food actually was kind of cart before the horse. I started Bright Line Eating and then realized, I think, I just thought, well, it's bad genes and I'm making poor choices. There's a folk singer. Her name is Mary Gaucher. She's a singer-songwriter who lives in Nashville, and she's a friend of the family. And I was talking to her right before I started Bright Line Eating, and she's had issues with food, and she's an alcoholic. She's been sober as long as I have. And Mary told me, she said, you know, the thing with food is if I'm not on a program of some sort, she's like, I'm on nothing, because she's an addict. And she goes, I'm either on a program or I'm just completely wheels off. There's no moderation, which is probably another thing that stuck in my head at the right time. When I found Bright Line Eating, I was like, no, that's what I am. I'm an addict, and it's not restricted to a white powdery substance of this variety or alcohol, or you're an addict, you know, and you're going to have those tendencies to overdo it. When other people can stop, you can't.
Well, I think too, understanding the science of why these substances can become addictive. I don't know that everybody starts out an addict, that you may have addictive tendencies, but, and it's not about debating it, but it's looking at another viewpoint. You can go through your life for a long time and then something happens.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was fine until, and yeah. I think that happens as well, where, you know, Meredith, you weren't like crazy overweight. So at some point, then you just started eating out a lot or whatever, and then something happens. All of a sudden, then you get into the diet mentality, and I think that puts you on a whole wheel too. But there is a point, like we talked about, like the no off switch. So when you're, you know, when you are in all the wheels are off the bus and I'm not on a diet this week, you're making up for lost time. So, right. You know, I
better enjoy it while I can was kind of my mentality, because soon enough I'm going to be back to trying to fix this, and that's going to suck.
So how did you incorporate that instead of going to what the heck effect, you know? Because you've probably, I don't want to assume, but I'm guessing that you've had some slips and slides with BLE.
Yeah.
How was your mentality different? Because you could have gone off track.
Yeah, I tried to give that some real thought today. The short version of the story is I was extremely strict for the first I started in February of 2020, and I got to maintenance by August of 2020, and I had started running and some other things, and it wasn't like I was trying to accelerate it. Okay, running helps me sleep and it helps keep me sane, and I added that back in. But it did result in me losing the weight faster. So, you know, the more weight I lost, the more motivated I was. And plus I knew, don't mess this up. I can drink whatever I want except alcohol. I can eat whatever I want as long as I measure it. I don't have snacks, and it's not sugar or flour. So I'm very, very strict. I get to August. I probably starting in August, because I was landing that plane and trying to go into maintenance, I had a little bit of room to play around with. And I also got about 15 pounds below my second goal weight. And so mentally I was thinking, okay, I've got a little bit of room to play around here with, because I was really nervous about changing anything. I think a lot of people go through that.
You mean changing your food plan to go into maintenance?
Yeah, I didn't want to increase it because the mentality is this works. I don't want to change this. The problem is, you know, you can't continue to lose 10 pounds a month forever. You see this, right?
This could be bad.
So when I was coming into maintenance, you know, I would try adding a protein here, and my problem is that I wasn't consistent with it. Like, I'll have an extra protein for lunch today, but it wasn't a planned out thing. It was a let's see if my weight goes up thing. And what that set me up for, by the time I hit 10 months, I had decided, you know what, I'm going to go, this is again the bargaining. I'm going to go back to my normal weight loss plan in terms of the meals. But then at night, I'm just going to have a completely unmeasured snack of grapes and cheese, because I told myself that was compliant, because the food is not necessarily off plan, but that's two bright lines right there that are just out the window. That's a snack, and it's not measured, and it doesn't take a whole bunch of cheese to make a real big difference. I also stopped stepping on the scale every day. right?
About the same time.
Yeah, yeah. Coincidentally, I lost interest in standing on the scale to measure my weight. So I kind of use the pants model. I'm like, no, I'm doing fine. I used to when I was really fluctuating a lot, I used to call it pants roulette. Every morning I'd get up and see what was going to work for work that day. Nope. so, and you have your jeans that okay, I'm still good in these jeans. And I decided to try some other jeans on and went, that's not right. And so I stepped on the scale and it was the exact same amount of weight that Ed had lost. It was 12 pounds that I'd gained in a shockingly short period of time. It really was about 3 or 4 weeks where where I'd gone to the cheese and grape ending of my day. And she's telling me, look, at least, yeah, she did. Her judgment's way better than mine. And she's sitting there going, you have to measure that if you're going to eat it. And I'm like, it was a lot of cheese. I don't eat any cheese anymore, by the way. And I don't miss it just like I don't drink tequila. I don't miss it as long as I don't, try it. Cheese is apparently a problem for me. But no, that was a stumble. But instead of the difference, for some reason, or not for some reason, I know the reason. The reason I didn't go completely off the track was because I had months and months and months where I didn't feel restricted. I had just felt good about how I was eating and what was happening. And so it wasn't like thinking, oh man, I've got to go through Atkins again, where I just want pancakes all the time. I was like, I know this works, not just to get weight off. That's like a byproduct. It works for me not to be thinking about food all the time. And so all I had to do when I realized I had gained 12 pounds, I said, you know what, I'm going to go back on the weight loss plan. And that's exactly what I did. And the weight melted off pretty quickly. I mean, I've been 175 for over a year now.
Did you feel like you were white knuckling it at that point, though, to the food chatter at night with the grapes and the cheese? Now, did you have to deal with that?
Yes, I had to go through all of that again. And I told Meredith this the years before we found Bright Line Eating. I had a friend ask me, he's like, aren't you ever tempted? And I was like, whenever somebody congratulates me on 20 years of sobriety, I say, it's okay to congratulate me for the first 6 months. Everything after that is just not having a drink. If I have a drink, there's no question I'm an alcoholic. Okay. Then I would need, if I didn't drink again, I would need another set of congratulations for the next 6 months, because I know that it gets back in there. And that's the part that's miserable, is the thinking about it. And can I run 3 miles tonight and have this half a burrito from Valero? No, I'm all of that came back. And then at night I was struggling again, where I had gotten to where I wasn't struggling. I mean, dinner was it, and I was done. I didn't have to think about it. I've gone through the same thing with nicotine. I quit for 19 months and everything was fine until I decided I could have one cigarette. And then I smoked for 20 years. I know how it works. And that's why I so desperately want to tell people who are new in the program, because I think, Dr. Thompson's right. Most people probably drop out in the first month. Why? Because it's when it feels the most restrictive. You're also trying to figure out a lot of difficult things. I wasn't known for my cooking abilities, for sure, for the last 30 years. And all of that seems like just a huge monumental change. And then you throw in any work stress or anything on top of it, and people are like, I'm out, and I'm like, if you just give yourself a chance to get to that part where all of a sudden that becomes the simplest part of your life. To me, that's what the whole thing is about.
Right. When that is kicked in, the automaticity, life changes. But you also are talking about something practical, I believe, because what I saw, you shared a YouTube, and I went to the YouTube, and we've had it in our Starting Out Bright group too. But you now have done some food prep videos, not to just help yourself, but to help others. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because how long was it before you said, we've got to do something with this? If we're both eating all of this vegetables, At what point did you say, hey, what is a simpler process? Or did you find it out from somebody else?
No, we came to it ourselves, but it was out of necessity. We work together. Sometimes she lets me live in her house, so we live together. And we were having this thing, we were going through it together. And even though she is not an addict, she was helping me be responsible for my food, right? Mm-hmm. And so she's kind of what I call an efficiency expert. And so that really started by us just going, well, let's see how much salad we can make and how long we can keep it good so that we don't have to, do this every single night. Because it's a real, I don't love to cook. I love to cook for about 45 minutes on the weekends, and I love to smoke a brisket, and I love to do ribs. But what I really love is when it's mealtime, being able to go to my fridge and put together a salad, heat up some vegetables, and just heat up protein that's already been made. And it's no more difficult on a day-to-day basis than heating up leftovers. So it wasn't that long. The thing that made us post about it, I think, is when Meredith joined the online group, and we would see those themes over and over again about people that, how do you eat all this food, number one, and then how do you prepare all this food? And it was clear to me that that's where some people are falling out, and I was like, well, we can at least show that part, because that part doesn't have to be that difficult. I mean, frankly, it is way quicker for me. We ate before we had this, and we prepped our, so we didn't get to do it this weekend because she was out of town, but we prepped our salad between 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock. We prepped our salad. I cooked steaks, heated up vegetables, and, she put on makeup for this. We had time to do all of that. And I'm not sure we could have ordered a pizza in the amount of time that we had. So, that's why we shared it. As far as figuring it out, that was just, I'm not going to cook vegetables every day, and they were so much better. That's the other thing, because the food has to taste good,
So to give everybody an idea, the videos that I saw is you prep a whole bunch of salads.
Yeah.
And you prep roasted vegetable. There's a question from Leslie who says, do you always eat the same veggies?
Look, I pretty much do. Sometimes we mix in asparagus, like if we're having salmon, because it just pairs really well with it. But for the most part, I used to be a big variety guy, and her more than me. To me, I'm like, I could eat a hamburger 2 meals in a row. Why not? It's delicious, was the way that I looked at it. She's like, well, we just had that. Okay. Yeah. And it was great. So why can't you do it again? So for me, I do eat the same vegetables: broccoli, cauliflower, carrots, green beans, okra, all mixed together.
And they're always roasted.
Yeah, we roast them first. And when we just roasted them and ate them, I didn't like them. They were still too, I hate to use the word moist, but they were just too laden with water still. Okay. And they weren't as tasty to me as I thought they could be. So what we do is we cook them for a week, but then every time we have a meal, I put my serving of fat in the pan in the form of butter and just heat them up in a pan.
Oh.
And yeah, and I've tried just doing that, by the way, just taking frozen vegetables and heating them up in the pan. And it's the same thing. There's just too much moisture, but something about roasting them first and then heating them up on the stove.
Okay.
Every time we have a meal, I get excited about the vegetables, and that is a miracle to me. Not everybody likes broccoli. Not everybody likes cauliflower. I will tell you this. I didn't like either of those things, like really kind of disdained them almost in the same way that some people hate cilantro. But I'm a big believer in gut biome, and that, what you want to eat changes depending on what you feed it. If you feed yourself nothing but Cheetos, your gut biome is going to tell you to eat Cheetos, because that's the bacteria that you've developed. It thrives and craves Cheetos. I believe in that. And then when people talk about your tastes changing, I really believe that's what it is. It is, you've developed healthier bacteria that wants different food. And so people say I never craved broccoli. I get it, but I absolutely crave broccoli. I crave salad now, which is a miracle to me.
Yeah, so
And I think it's just because I eat so consistently. So for me, it's not a problem. Some people, I think it would, and we didn't do that initially. We had a lot more variety initially, and there is a trade-off, convenience to variety. But I found out that I don't like asparagus as much as I like the convenience and the taste, really, of kind of how we do it. So yeah, there's
And,
not a lot of
and
variety.
as you were saying, too moist,
Yeah,
Leslie back, she popped up and said, I think soggy is the word you're looking
yeah, that was a much better word. When I order brisket, being in Texas, when we go eat barbecue, they have two choices. They have lean and moist. Every time they say that word, I'm like, there's got to be a better word. It's from the point, right? I don't want, don't make me say that word. I don't like it.
Exactly. I know that you do some considerable amount of traveling. So what do you do then? I mean, are you the pro at finding things or what? Or do you bring things with you?
This is going to sound terrible. When we started it, one of my first posts, because I went back and looked at February of 2020 to see kind of what was going through my head at the time. And one of the first things we did, our daughter she's a singer-songwriter that lives in Nashville, and she was playing a music festival right before COVID hit. And so we were going to be in Corpus Christi, Texas for a few days. And that's our dog. And I should say, she thought I was insane, but I got a huge cooler and filled it up with all of our vegetables and all those things for that trip. And it ended up being super convenient. It ended up being incredibly important because I was only 2 or 3 weeks into the program, and I needed to know, just like I was journaling, I needed to know exactly what I was going to eat. And I also, didn't have any comfort level that I could figure out on my own out in the wild what was going to be acceptable or what was going to be compliant. So yeah, no, we did bring our food. That was the only time since then, because I figured out pretty quickly, steakhouses are safe. Generally where we are, I can almost, even in an airport, I can almost always figure out something that's going to work. And after a couple of years of doing it, you have a much better idea of really what a portion is. Mm-hmm. And not only that, my body now tells me when I've had enough to eat. It's not like I can really kid myself anymore. I hit a point where I go, oh, I'm full. And it's not because my gut is sticking out to here or I'm in pain. My brain just knows, oh, you've had enough. You're good for the next 6 hours.
So and I have to agree with you, because I've had a similar reaction where I'm having a 1-plate meal and I'm like, no, I really think this is it right here. It's so strange, because for me, I was a second and third helping type of person. And, there was no off switch. That was, when you're around really good food. My husband's a phenomenal cook, and really not blaming him, just that there just was no off switch. There was just readily available, and it was delicious, and just kept going.
Yep.
Katie, bar the door.
I can relate to all of that. That's a compliment, by the way, on your cooking.
So, the thing is, do you believe that, when you got into this, I wonder, we didn't talk about this at all, but, people look at food like this is all about the food. But you spoke a lot about the mental energy as far as like the freedom when you gave up alcohol. Yeah. How much of this is food and how much is this the mind for you?
Well, it depends on when you ask me. At the very beginning of Bright Line Eating, there was a certain, compulsion in my thought process with food. This is so radical and so different. Am I going to be able to continue to do this? I've got relatives asking me, have you lost your mind? By the way, a trick for that is I never tell anybody anymore that I don't eat flour and I don't eat sugar. I just tell them it's an honest statement. I tell them that my doctor has me on a whole foods diet because that's what the diet is. And when I told my doctor after he saw that I'd lost a tremendous amount of weight, he asked me what I was doing. And I said I was eating a whole foods diet. And he said, continue to do that. So as far as I'm concerned, I am following my doctor's advice by eating a whole foods diet. And it's a simple way to explain it. So at the beginning, I I think thinking a lot more about food, and the in between meals was really tough for me. And, that whole thing you go through whenever you're going through withdrawal, in addition to trying to change how your brain processes what may be hunger or what may just be a compulsion, um, right now, the whole deal, all the posts where people are asking for recipes to make pizza crust out of cauliflower or whatever, I'm like, some different people have different reasons for wanting to do that. Some people really love to cook, and they love variety, and I can relate to that, but not on a real personal level. When I drank the same beer all the time, and I drank the same scotch all the time, and the same tequila. But I didn't venture out into gin territory. I didn't, so the biggest deal for me, it wasn't like, oh, I really miss Miller Lite right now. When I got sober, it was, man, I so don't miss waking up in jail. And I really don't miss not thinking about alcohol every second that I'm at work and every second that I'm not at work. So the mental aspect, when it took over, that became the most important thing with alcohol. And the same exact thing happened with me with food. It's like I did the intermittent fasting, not by design. It's just I don't eat breakfast. I've never been able to. So my first bite of food for the day is at noon. And my last bite of food is usually about 6:30. And I eat all of my food in that time. And I've never had blood sugar issues. I just don't think about food anymore. Those are the posts that I scroll past, when people are asking for recipes or whether or not this specific thing is compliant. It's not because I think I'm beyond it or anything. It's just that I don't think about food in that way anymore.
And I think, what you said, though, and I know you're saying it in the way of specifically about recipes and all that, but I think you're making a point here. Scroll on by. I know to protect my program, there are times, even not always, but sometimes I'm not at that level that day to help with somebody else's struggle because I'm struggling myself. Now, on a better day, I can add to the conversation, but there are sometimes like, what? I can't get deeper into this today. And I will be right there for you tomorrow, but today I can't because, life blew up.
Well,
and so you got to protect and also just like the cheese, you have to protect your program from triggers.
Right. Well, and it's so important that when you have the energy to help somebody, you use it if you can.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you come across as a snippy know-it-all who's irritated, and that doesn't help anybody at all. They're like, well, buddy, I don't want whatever it is you have that you think is food freedom because you're a jerk. I don't want to be that guy either, So anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just think it's an interesting question that we didn't talk about. Well, how little I think about food is the whole reason why I think this is amazing.
Exactly.
You
are making a huge impact on others by just your example, by just living it. And the thing is, we did say this the other day. If you were taking a tequila shot, people would be really up in arms. Yeah. But if you were taking a Twinkie, they'd probably laugh.
Told you. Yeah. You want that sugar and flour, don't you?
But I believe part of it is people are not used to others being able to be sustainable on any kind of program.
Which is pretty telling in and of itself when people talk about it not being an addiction. I don't get real hung up in 47 questionnaire, type things to figure out. My test has always been very, very simple. Is this creating a problem in my life? That's one. And if so, have I tried to stop and failed? That was my test for AA. That was my test for this. And every time the answer is yes, it's creating a problem, whether it be health issues, weight, self-esteem, whatever that is. And have I tried to change my behavior by myself unsuccessfully long-term? just the same way that I could stop drinking on my own for 6 weeks. And then I would be just as drunk, 2 months later. Same thing would happen with food. There's so many overlapping similarities between those two that I'm like, okay, which one of those is more deadly? When 68% of the, at least American adult population, is either overweight or obese. And I saw it yesterday. They're trying to reduce the amount of sodium in food, which I thought was fascinating. And the reason is because so many people are overweight that obviously it's a contributor to hypertension, to high blood pressure. And I'm like, okay, just like when they took fat out of food and replaced it with sugar,
right?
They're going to do the same thing with sodium, and we will now see advertised again, like we did in the 70s, low sodium. Of course, it'll be loaded with sugar. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I don't, to me, I said this last night, this is almost like a national security issue, which goes way beyond, how it personally affects us. Just as a country, I feel like we're going to have to get a handle on it. I don't think that sugar is evil. I don't think that flour is evil. I don't think tequila is evil. I can't handle those things in moderation. She totally can. So it's not the substance, it's how, I react to it. I react very badly to it in a not healthy way.
And the believability of this kind of program, I truly believe can only happen by you and me and everyone here and those listening later when they can actually live it. I have a family member, well, I have more than one, who has talked to me about losing weight. And, it's great to talk about it, but if I start being like given the sermon,
right,
that's not going to go well because it never went well for me. And right. I had an experience a couple weeks ago where I was at our grandson's football game. I was high up on the stands and I'm looking down and I'm noticing people walking up the stairs, heavy people, as well as, normal size, right size, whatever you want to call it. But those heavy people, I looked and I saw myself. I thought that was me. And I've got a long way to go, but I'm thinking that was me. And my next thought was, how can I help you? How can I help them? And as quickly as I thought that, I thought, how can I help anybody unless I help myself? Unless I'm an example. If I can actually live this and it's believable then, because I truly think why someone would laugh at the Twinkie thing, it's not been done.
Right.
Who do you know who's kept off 50, 100 pounds for a couple years or what? I mean, I can't count them other than the people I've met here.
We saw this in our own family. I've carried a lot of guilt around about the fact that two of our kids, had a weight issue. They now are both adults and they have figured out their healthy methods for not having a weight issue. But I always felt like, I remembered being 13 years old and somebody putting me on a salad only diet for a while. And I didn't know if that was good or bad, or if that's what started the whole cascade of me feeling like, I better eat while I can because I'm going to have to go on a diet again. I honestly don't know the answer to that. But I know that the only thing that helped change the way that our kids looked at food was after she and I, about 10 years ago, lost a considerable amount of weight. Now, all of mine started creeping back up because it was just counting calories, and that just becomes exhausting at some point, and I just don't have the energy for that over years. So I got down to about 200, so about 25 pounds heavier than I am now. I was like, that's good enough. But around that time, I was working so hard at it that my daughter and my youngest son both, at the same time, I'm apologizing to them about how I fed them as kids, just letting them kind of have whatever they really wanted, which I don't think is the right approach either. And not having, the healthy things that I should have been eating the whole time in the house. I've carried a lot of guilt about that around, but you nailed it. And that is, until you can get yourself straight, how can you possibly accept, or expect to be of benefit to anybody else with respect to that. The most help I've ever been able to give fellow alcoholics, it all comes after they're like, well, when was your last drink? If it was last Thursday, they're probably not going to listen to a lot of what I had to say.
This is very true. You're right on. You're living it.
So,
and I can't believe the time is just going away so fast, but I do want to ask you no, it's so great.
I ramble.
What is like a highlight of a non-scale victory that you'd like to share? Both of you.
Mine's going to be more pronounced. Number one, I like to talk more. Traveling is a complete, when I'm not having to squeeze my knees together on a plane so that I don't invade the space of the person next to me. That is such the flight from here to Los Angeles is about 4 hours. And that's a long time to squeeze your knees together, and just try not to do that. So I took a picture of the first time I put a belt on this year in a plane and had that much of the seatbelt left over. That was definitely different because I've been in the position before where I'm like, I'm not sure this is getting done with one. And I didn't want to ask for the extender,
Yeah.
So that was big. Being able to just ride in a car for hours without hurting. With me, I focused more on the physical, being able to get back into yoga, being able to run for a few miles at a time. I had very little interest. I'm extremely happily married. Nobody cares what I look like other than me. But the movement that I missed from my younger days when I was an athlete, just being able to jump up off the floor and all of that stuff, that's the whole thing for me. When I get out of bed and stand up and nothing hurts, my knees don't hurt, my ankles don't hurt. I can literally bound into the bathroom and not completely avoid the mirror as I walk by. I got more on fire with this after I had that. It wasn't really a relapse, but after my lines got blurry, I got way more on fire with the program because I got back into it. I was back in that headspace of having to work a little bit, but then I was just like instantly so grateful because I hadn't completely blown up. I had all of the tools still, and I still had something that looked kind of like a right-sized body. But that's when we did the videos, by the way.
And you had the muscle memory from those months prior.
Right. Which was the difference. It wasn't white knuckle muscle memory of how difficult it was. It was like, man, I should have been doing this 30 years ago. That's really the way that I felt. That's my biggest regret with the whole thing is that I feel like I don't think I have life figured out, but I feel like this part of it, I really understand at a granular level. And all I got to do if I start slipping, because the wind will blow, nobody's perfect, is to remember my best days, whether that's running through a mountain trail in New Mexico or just getting out of bed without making old man noises or whatever that is. I try to soak all that stuff in and go, no, this is how it should be, So those are mine. How about yours?
How about you?
You can say I cook more.
That's true. He does cook more. For me, eating healthy helps a lot. I have really bad knees, so just the healthier eating and any amount of weight I can get off my knees helps tremendously. I tried to avoid flour in the first place because I'm not celiac, but it affected me, just my joints and made me sick almost. So I would try to avoid flour in the first place. But just eating healthy, I think. For me, makes it better. Yeah, and the traveling, went to a music festival this weekend and, was able to sit in a chair without dying for 3 days. And
how many miles did you walk?
I think 10.
She walked 10 miles.
Yeah.
Wow.
On Saturday.
Much easier to walk if I walk 10 miles.
Which is amazing. One more question.
Sure.
There's somebody here who's going to hear your story, hear you, and is considering bright line eating. Maybe they've come from a place of addiction, and have gotten sober like you did or whatever. What would you say to them?
The only thing that I've consistently said in the theme that keeps hitting me is when somebody's new in this program, I want them to really understand it is really hard for a little while, but so worth it. It's not that feeling that you have at the beginning, or that I had at the beginning, because I recognize how hard it was for me to quit drinking. I never wanted to go through that again. I get the same exact freedom. If you're an addict and you've ever kicked anything, then you probably know what that freedom is, whether it's financial or it's job related or just chaos related or family related. Having that freedom and that self-esteem back and your self-worth, it's the same exact thing with this. You got to be strong enough to get over whatever your hump is. With me, it was mercifully brief. It was 3 weeks. Some people, it's a month. Some people go through that for several months. And I'm like, whatever that time period is, it is 100% worth it. It's hard for a while, and then it's easy, is how I feel about it.
And make it easy. I think that's the key to our success too. We just, we try to make it easy as easy as we can with the food.
Yeah, for sure. If I was cooking vegetables and using up 8 pots and pans every single night and putting recipes together, I would have bailed a long time ago.
So get on the food prep train.
Yes.
Whatever that is for you.
That's right.
And it works for you.
Yeah, and it may be buying vegetables that way. It may be whatever. You can do this in a million ways. I mean, it's not that restrictive of a diet.
Right.
It's the entire universe of fruits, vegetables, and meats, and nuts, and fats, and
just no cheese for you.
No
cheese for you.
I've whittled down what my universe is. I can't have pineapple either. That one's off. That one's off the menu because it is straight sugar. Yep, I can't do pineapple.
Cheese is for dogs.
Ooh, cheese and pineapple. That sounds lovely.
Well, the time is up and we got to go, but I just want to thank you so much. So much.
We both really appreciate you asking. We're trying to give back because I feel like it is a gift. And if people could just get over the weirdness of it, it could help a lot of people. So thanks for what you're doing.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'm so glad for your taking one for the team and saying yes. Meredith, what a pleasure to meet you too.
Awesome.
So I appreciate it. And I'm going to say goodnight as I do each week. Good night. Stay bright. Don't let the bed bugs bite. Good night, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
So, Chris and Meredith, how would you like to play 3-Question Thursday?
I can't wait. I have no idea what this is. So.
And I don't know what I'm going to ask you. So here we go. 3-Question Thursday. All right. So you've talked about in this interview, you talked about those special vegetables that you make roasted. Okay. Mm-hmm. What are the things that you compile to make these salads be able to stay fresh? What are the pieces?
It's 7 ingredients. Most of them are heavy. Okay. We use shredded carrots because those are okay. If they're shredded, they don't go bad in a week. All right. We use celery hearts, chop those up ourselves. All right. I don't think it would matter if you got chopped up celery, but we chop it up ourselves. Mm-hmm. All right. Red cabbage, small head of red cabbage. That stuff will last through the apocalypse. It just doesn't seem to go bad ever. All right. Cherry tomatoes.
Red
onion. So a lot of harder, heavy vegetables. Mm-hmm. And then romaine lettuce. We use the stuff that's prepackaged, romaine hearts. Okay. It's pretty hardy. I think you can use iceberg too. We did for a long time. And what's our 7th ingredient, Meredith?
It is cucumbers. And we've just discovered if you use the pickling cucumbers that come in the bag instead of regular cucumbers, they don't have quite as much moisture in it, which is kind of helps with the salad not getting soggy during the week.
So we always had a propensity to put vegetables in the refrigerator no matter what. Like if I get cucumbers and I'm not making salad right now, I just go ahead and put them in the refrigerator. That's actually wrong. Cucumbers. Yeah, it should be left out. A lot of vegetables should be left out. Peppers are another one. Leave them out on the counter and they actually their shelf life's going to be a lot longer. But when we do, so when we're ready, we cut all this stuff up. All we do is put these in freezer bags that have the ability to let all of the air out. And now I learned after we posted the video, somebody said, put a paper towel in the bag with it, let all the air out. And then every time I make my 8 ounces of salad from that bag, I throw that paper towel out because it'll be soggy, and you get another one and put it in there, get all the air out, and just put it in the refrigerator. And this last batch, because we usually make enough for 2 of us for a week, so it's 14 salads times 8 ounces. You do the math. I know that it lasts for a week, but because she wasn't here for a few days, I was still eating that salad yesterday. So it was still crisp and good 10 days later. So I think it's a combination of the freezer bag and maybe the magic of the paper towel. I don't know, but mostly it's picking heavier vegetables that are and making it not mostly lettuce, because I think that's the problem. And obviously your lettuce has got to be very dry when you make the salad.
Make sure, if you wash it and then dry it very well. So
but that's it.
Okay. And I see a comment. I quarter the cucumber and then slice out the seeds. I don't want to waste my weight on seeds.
That would work too. Now that goes heads up with my goal to make things as simple as possible, because I would pretty much cut my finger off if I got any more. But no, that would work. That absolutely, because that's where the problem is with cucumbers. And you can use all kinds of different vegetables. That just
you
works
could use
for us.
those mini peppers or anything else you wanted, mushrooms.
The other day, Chris, when we talked, you said these words, I eat slower now. How did that happen?
Wasn't conscious, I was always the guy that finished his plate first. Not really like so I could go get my second plate. It was the same way I drank, I just consume it as fast as I can before either somebody takes it away. I don't know what it was, but I just ate super fast. And I think it wasn't, I'd heard over the years, you hear all these tips about things that people who can maintain their weight do. They eat more slowly. And with me, it's always a chicken and egg thing. Well, are they maintaining their weight because they eat more slowly? Or do they eat more slowly because they're not super concerned about, being able to eat their food? Is their food not interesting? Is it? I don't know. It happened with me. I just noticed that if I took the time to make a plate of food that I loved, and I knew the vegetables were good, I knew the steak was medium rare, I knew that this was going to be an enjoyable thing for me, I just started eating it slowly. It's almost like I don't want to say like a sacrament, because that's not right. But that's really more how I felt. Like, this is something I need to kind of honor, and I just ate it more slowly, not for any dietary related reason. I'm just like, I'm going to enjoy this.
Maybe even appreciation a little bit.
I think that's what it is.
I have to say this quote that Ed put in the chat: the easy button versus on again, off again, the good day, bad day, good day. That's hard on a person. No kidding, Ed. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And
I love Ed.
Yes, I do too. He's done so much for the community. Such a great servant's heart. So one last question. In all of your experience,
bonus round.
Do you think that these hardships that, you could say, having to cut out alcohol, do you think that you'd be where you are right now as far as the willingness to do this?
I have this theory that is just from inside my own brain. I discussed it with you a little bit about why this program seems to trend older. So many people in my kids' generation, they're Gen Z and some millennials are thrown in there. They're so willing to go and do something like a ketogenic diet because they have seen people lose a large amount of weight and do that. I think you almost have to beat yourself up enough to really not just want the change. Everybody wants the change, to appreciate what real change is as opposed to temporary change. Okay. So I feel like being an alcoholic was a huge advantage to me coming to this program, because I could understand from an addiction standpoint what it was. But I think other people could absolutely benefit. You don't have to be an addict to get this program, but I almost kind of believe you've got to have tried a whole bunch of other things and not failed, succeeded. You have to have tried some other things, succeeded in getting the weight off, and then seen. So what's different? If this was just a food plan, eat whole foods, eat 2 or 3 times a day and weigh your food. Nobody's buying that book, and nobody is going to sustain weight loss with that plan if that's the plan. You know, I think you almost have to have a level of just you've been beat up enough in maturity maybe to get it. It's, again, just a theory. There are some younger people who do this. I visit the Bright Line Eating Forum on Reddit, and people kind of treat it like a diet. And they're like, well, I'm not a crystal gazer, and, you know, the Facebook group drives me nuts. And I'm like, well, dude, what you're doing is just not bright line eating, you know, and I'm not a purist about it. I'm not. If you can use it every other day and you can get weight off and that's your goal, and that's great. It's just a whole foods diet. It's not bright line eating, because that part is in between the ears, and that freedom. What 23-year-old, they're out there. I'm not minimizing the issues that 23-year-olds can have, especially if they've been overweight their entire lives. Okay. But I think has the ability to appreciate that freedom. I just don't think you've been beat up enough, you know? So whatever my struggles are, I don't have any more struggles than anybody else. And I got way more blessings than I think most people. Most of them are sitting in a chair next to me, you know?
Yeah, that is really what I should have asked, is the support piece, because I see it. And, you know, I know that is so important in your lives. It's important in all of our lives. And thank goodness for the community, for those who do not have that person sitting next to you, who are your leader and willing to make the salad,
right,
roast the vegetables,
right,
all the stuff.
Even for the people who do, I don't think I would have been as successful on this program without like kind of that online community, because it's just like the same reason that old timers go to AA. It's to see that new guy walking in and to remind yourself, okay, that's where I was. It's not just to help new people. That can keep you sober, but we need that reminder constantly. I look at that board every day. I look at Reddit every day. And every once in a while I'll see somebody where I'm like, that I can absolutely relate to. And that person, I might be able to say something to help that person, which will help me. You know, that's more of the kind of where I get the 12-step recovery portion.
Absolutely. Even a like, you know, a like or a care or a heart, you know, we're all in this together. And again, this has been great. Thank you so much for your willingness. So great to meet you, and
easy to talk to. I'm sorry, I talk for a living, and so it's difficult for me to turn it off. But thank you very, very much.
Thanks for being on Starting Out Bright, and thank you for playing 3-Question Thursday.
Take care, y'all.
Have a good night. Stay bright, everybody. Stay bright.
Right. Bye.
Good night.